The massive passenger transport Celestial Dream shuddered violently as Captain Elena Rodriguez fought to keep the ship steady. Warning lights bathed the bridge in angry red as the navigation system screamed alerts in 3 different languages. Through the viewport, the twisted wreckage of what had been Jump Gate 7 drifted like metallic bones against the star field. "Ma'am, we've got multiple hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, reported Lieutenant Chen, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Emergency bulkheads are holding, but life support is failing in those sections." Elena's hands moved across the control console with practiced precision, her dark eyes scanning the damage reports that cascaded across her screens. 23 years of flying everything from atmospheric shuttles to deep space haulers had prepared her for emergencies, but this was different. This was a disaster that should have been impossible. The Celestial Dream was supposed to be taking 180 passengers on a routine cruise through the Andromeda Gateway. Families celebrating anniversaries, business people heading to the outer colonies, students on educational tour. All of them now trapped in a crippled ship with failing life support, surrounded by the debris field of a destroyed space station. "Captain, I'm picking up some kind of transmission from the wreckage," called out Communications Officer Park from her station. "It's not standard distress frequency. Sounds almost like." "Like what, Officer Park?" "Like a warning, ma'am, automated repeating every 30 seconds. It's in Old Earth military code." Elena's blood ran cold. Old Earth military code hadn't been used in over a decade, not since the Unification Wars ended and the Human Defense Coalition was dissolved. Only veterans of those conflicts would even recognize it, let alone know how to decode it. The ship lurched again, and Elena could hear the groaning of stressed metal throughout the hull. They were losing structural integrity fast. She pulled up the passenger manifest on her secondary screen, scanning the names and faces of the people depending on her to get them home alive. Among them, she spotted several alien dignitaries from the Centauri Federation, a family of Tau Session refugees, and what looked like a group of young Altarian students. The galaxy had changed so much since her military days. Humans were no longer alone among the stars, no longer fighting each other for scraps of territory and resources. They were part of something bigger now, a growing alliance of species that had found common ground despite their differences. These passengers represented that hope, that future where cooperation replaced conquest. But right now, none of that political progress mattered. What mattered was the fact that her ship was dying, and she had minutes to figure out how to save everyone aboard. "Ma'am, I've decoded that transmission," Park announced, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a warning about some kind of experimental weapon test. Says this entire sector was supposed to be cleared of civilian traffic." Elena's jaw clenched. Someone had destroyed Jump Gate 7 during a weapons test, and they hadn't bothered to make sure the area was empty first. The Celestial Dream had jumped into the middle of it, taking damage from both the initial blast wave and the debris field that followed. "Any word from the test facility? Emergency frequencies." "Negative, ma'am. Either they don't know we're here or they don't care." Elena finished the thought that Park couldn't bring herself to say out loud. She'd seen enough military operations to know that sometimes civilian casualties were considered acceptable losses, especially when classified projects were involved. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated, causing several crew members to grab their stations for support. Through the internal communication system, Elena could hear the rising panic of passengers as they felt their vessel slowly tearing itself apart around them. "Captain," Chen spoke up again, "I'm showing massive power fluctuations in the main reactor. If we don't get the engine core stabilized in the next 20 minutes, we're looking at a cascade failure." A cascade failure meant total power loss. No life support, no artificial gravity, no navigation control. They would be left drifting helpless in space while their oxygen slowly ran out. Even if rescue ships were dispatched immediately, it would take hours for them to reach this remote sector. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, drawing on training that she hadn't needed to use in over a decade. The Human Defense Coalition had taught her to fly in combat conditions, to make split-second decisions when lives hung in the balance. They'd also taught her skills that she'd hoped never to use again. When she opened her eyes, her expression had changed. The worry lines around her eyes had deepened, but there was something else there now. A cold, calculating focus that her civilian crew had never seen before. Officer Park, I need you to open a channel on the emergency military frequency. Authorization code Delta 77 Whiskey. Park's fingers hesitated over her console. Ma'am, that's a restricted frequency. Civilian vessels aren't authorized to. Just do it, Park. The communications officer reluctantly complied, her confusion evident as she worked to access frequencies that should have been blocked to merchant vessels. But somehow, her captain's authorization code unlocked systems that Park didn't even know existed aboard their ship. As the channel opened, Alina could hear the familiar static of encrypted military communications. In the background, she caught fragments of urgent conversations between what sounded like fighter pilots and ground control. Someone was coordinating a response to the destruction of Jump Gate 7, and they were treating it like an active combat situation. Alina picked up her headset, pausing for just a moment before speaking. What she was about to do would change everything. Her crew would learn that their captain had secrets, that the woman they'd served under for 3 years wasn't quite who they thought she was. But as another section of the ship's hull buckled under stress, and as the desperate voices of frightened passengers echoed through the corridors, Alina made her choice. She keyed the microphone and spoke in a voice that carried absolute authority. This is Civilian Transport Celestial Dream requesting immediate assistance. We have 180 souls aboard and are experiencing catastrophic system failures. Ship is breaking apart. Repeat, ship is breaking apart. The military channel went silent for a moment, then crackled to life with a response that made Alina's breath catch in her throat. Celestial Dream, this is Falcon Leader. Identify yourself and state your current condition. That voice, even filtered through military encryption and communication static, Alina recognized it immediately. It belonged to someone she'd flown with during the war, someone who'd seen her at her best and her worst. Someone who might be her only hope of saving the lives depending on her. Alina looked around the bridge at her crew, all of them watching her with a mixture of confusion and growing hope. They didn't understand what was happening, but they could sense that something had changed. Their captain suddenly seemed different, more confident, like she knew something they didn't. Taking a deep breath, Alina made the decision that would reveal everything she'd spent 10 years trying to forget. She keyed the microphone again, and when she spoke, it was with the crisp precision of a military pilot reporting to her commanding officer. Falcon Leader, this is Captain Alina Rodriguez, formerly Major Rodriguez of the 47th Tactical Fighter Squadron. My ship is critically damaged, and I have civilians aboard including non-human Federation dignitaries. I need immediate assistance and safe passage to the nearest station. The silence that followed seemed to stretch on forever. Alina could almost hear the wheels turning in Falcon Leader's head as he processed what she'd just told him. Alina Rodriguez was supposed to be dead, lost in action during the final battle of the Unification Wars. Her official military record showed that she died when her fighter was shot down over Europa, her body never recovered. But here she was, alive and apparently commanding a civilian transport in one of the most dangerous sectors of space. The implications of that revelation would send shockwaves through both military and civilian authorities. Finally, Falcon Leader's voice returned, and Alina could hear the amazement in his tone even through the static. Ghost Rider, is that really you? Alina's crew turned to stare at her with wide eyes. Ghost Rider. That call sign belonged to a legend, a pilot whose exploits during the war had become the stuff of military folklore. Ghost Rider was the pilot who'd single-handedly taken out an entire enemy squadron over Mars. Ghost Rider was the woman who'd volunteered for suicide missions and somehow always made it back alive. Ghost Rider was supposed to be dead. But as Alina Rodriguez looked out at the debris field surrounding her damaged ship, as she listened to the frightened voices of the passengers she'd sworn to protect, she realized that sometimes the dead had to come back to life when the living needed them most. Alina's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the microphone. The call sign, Ghost Rider, echoed in her mind like a ghost from another life. Around her, the bridge crew stared in stunned silence. Lieutenant Chen's mouth hung open, while Officer Park looked like she'd seen an actual ghost. Roger, Falcon Leader, Ghost Rider is very much alive and in need of assistance. Alina's voice carried the steady tone of someone who'd faced death before and refused to blink. I've got hull breaches, failing life support, and a reactor that's about to go critical. Time is not on our side. The response came immediately, crisp and professional despite the underlying excitement. "Copy that, Ghost Rider. We're painting your vessel now. Falcon 2 through 6 are moving to intercept. What's your current passenger count and crew status?" 180 passengers, crew of 15. We have injured but no casualties yet. Alina paused, then added something that would change the entire dynamic of the rescue operation. "Be advised, Falcon Leader, approximately 30% of my passengers are non-human Federation citizens. We have Tau Session refugees, Centauri diplomatic personnel, and a group of Altarian students aboard." The silence that followed was longer this time. Alina knew she'd just dropped a political bombshell. The presence of alien citizens aboard a human vessel in distress would trigger dozens of diplomatic protocols. Any rescue operation would need to consider the potential ramifications of how different species were treated during the crisis. But Alina also knew something else. The revelation of non-human passengers would guarantee that this rescue received the highest priority. The new galactic alliance was still fragile, built on careful diplomatic relationships and mutual respect. Letting alien citizens die in human space would be a disaster that could set back interspecies cooperation by decades. "Ghost Rider, confirm alien passengers aboard your vessel." "Confirmed, Falcon Leader. Among them are 3 Centauri ambassadors' aides returning from the Terran Colonial Conference. 12 Tau Session civilians granted refugee status after the mining platform disaster, and 15 Altarian exchange students from the Cultural Integration Program." Alina could practically hear the calculations happening in Falcon Leader's head. The Centauri ambassador's aides alone made this a top priority diplomatic incident. The Tau Sessions were survivors of an industrial accident that had already strained human-alien relations in that sector, and the Altarian students represented the first successful educational exchange program between humans and one of the galaxy's most advanced technological species. "Roger that, Ghost Rider. Upgrading to Priority Alpha Rescue Operation. We've got 4 F-22s inbound to your position with emergency repair capabilities. Colonial Command is dispatching the heavy rescue vessel Asterisk Prometheus with full medical teams and alien-compatible life support systems." Alina felt a surge of relief, but it was tempered by the reality of her ship's condition. Through the viewport, she could see more debris drifting past, some pieces large enough to cause additional damage if they struck the hull. The Celestial Dream was trapped in the wreckage field, unable to maneuver effectively with her damaged engines. "Ma'am," Chen spoke up hesitantly, "the reactor temperature is climbing faster than our cooling systems can handle. I'm reading 15 minutes before we hit critical mass." 15 minutes. Alina's mind raced through the possibilities. Even the fastest military fighters would need at least 20 minutes to reach their position. The Prometheus would take over an hour. They needed to buy time, but with the reactor failing and the hull continuing to deteriorate, their options were limited. "Falcon Leader, be advised we have approximately 15 minutes before reactor failure. Request immediate assistance with damage control procedures." "Copy, Ghost Rider. Falcon 2 is our damage control specialist, transferring you to her frequency now." The channel switched, and a new voice came through the speakers. It was female, crisp, and professional, with a slight accent that marked her as someone from the outer colonies. "Ghost Rider, this is Falcon 2. Call me Wrench. I've reviewed your ship's specifications, and I think we can extend your reactor cooling cycle. Are you familiar with emergency containment field generation?" Alina's crew looked confused, but Alina nodded grimly. Containment field generation was a military technique used to prevent reactor overloads in combat situations. It required precise timing and complete understanding of the ship's power systems. More importantly, it was extremely dangerous if done incorrectly. "Roger, Wrench, I'm familiar with the procedure." "Outstanding. I'm going to walk you through a modified version that should work with civilian-grade equipment. But Ghost Rider, I need to know something first. What's your engineering background?" It was a fair question. The procedure they were discussing required someone with intimate knowledge of reactor systems and containment field physics. Most civilian captains would have neither the training nor the clearance to attempt such a complex operation. Alina looked around at her crew, seeing the trust in their eyes despite their confusion. They didn't understand what was happening, but they believed in their captain. They believed she could save them. "Wrench, I have full certification in military reactor systems, emergency repair protocols, and containment field theory. I served as both pilot and engineer during extended patrol missions. What Alina didn't say was that her engineering knowledge went far beyond basic certification. During the war, she'd been part of an elite unit that specialized in behind-enemy lines operations. They'd flown deep into hostile territory with minimal support, which meant every pilot needed to be able to repair and maintain their own equipment under combat conditions. She'd spent months learning to coax extra performance from damaged reactors, to jury-rig life support systems from spare parts, and to keep complex machinery running long past its designed limits. The skills she'd learned keeping her fighter operational in combat zones were exactly what she needed now to save her passenger ship. Copy that, Ghost Rider. Beginning emergency containment procedure now. First, I need you to access your ship's emergency engineering protocols. You should see a panel marked Military Override somewhere near your main console. Alina's crew watched in amazement as their captain's fingers moved to a section of the control panel they'd never seen her use before. Hidden behind a maintenance cover was indeed a panel marked with military designations and warning labels. As Alina activated it, new displays came online, showing detailed readings of the ship's reactor core that went far beyond standard civilian monitoring systems. I have the panel wrench, reading reactor temperature at 87% of critical threshold and climbing. Roger, now here's where it gets tricky. You're going to need to manually reroute power from your navigation and communication systems to boost the containment field generators. This will leave you flying blind and deaf, but it should buy us the time we need. Lieutenant Chen looked horrified. Captain, if we lose navigation, we won't be able to avoid the debris field, and without communications, the rescue ships won't be able to find us. Alina understood his concern, but she also understood something he didn't. The F-22s inbound to their position weren't just rescue ships. They were the most advanced fighters in the human fleet, equipped with sensor systems that could track a pebble from 1,000 kilometers away. Once they arrived, the Celestial Dream wouldn't need its own navigation or communication systems. Wrench, confirm that Falcon Squadron has full tracking capabilities for our vessel. Affirmative, Ghost Rider. Once we're in range, we can guide you through the debris field remotely. We can also serve as communication relay to Colonial Command and the Prometheus Asterisk. Alina made her decision. Beginning power rerouting now. All stations prepare for navigation and communication blackout. Her fingers danced across the controls, implementing procedures she'd learned in the crucible of combat. The bridge lights dimmed as power flowed away from non-essential systems and into the reactor's containment field generators. The main display screens flickered and went dark, leaving only the emergency lighting and the soft glow of the reactor monitoring systems. The effect was immediate. The rising temperature readings began to level off, then actually started to drop slightly. The containment fields were holding, buying them precious time. But as the last of their navigation displays went dark, Alina realized they were now completely dependent on the approaching fighter squadron for survival. The Celestial Dream had become a helpless giant, drifting blind through a field of deadly debris with nothing but faith that help would arrive in time. Containment field stable, Wrench. We've got our time. Outstanding work, Ghost Rider. Falcon Squadron ETA is now 12 minutes. Just hold tight and keep that reactor cool. Alina settled back in her captain's chair, listening to the ship around her. The groaning of stressed metal had lessened slightly, and the panicked voices from the passenger compartments had given way to a tense but more manageable quiet. Word was spreading that their captain was somehow connected to the military ships coming to rescue them, and that connection was giving people hope. But Alina knew the hardest part was still ahead. Getting her ship stable was only the first step. They still needed to navigate through the debris field, transfer the most critically injured passengers to medical facilities, and somehow explain to galactic authorities how a supposedly dead war hero had ended up commanding a civilian transport. As she waited for the fighters to arrive, Alina couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. She'd spent 10 years running from her past, building a new life as far from the military as possible. But when crisis struck, when lives hung in the balance, all that training and experience had come flooding back. Maybe some people were just born to fly into danger when others needed saving. Maybe that was what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of wonders and threats. When the universe threw its worst at you, You adapted, you improvised, and you never gave up. The radio crackled with static as Wrench's voice returned. Ghost Rider, we've got visual contact with your vessel. Falcon Squadron moving into escort formation. You're not flying alone anymore. The first sight of the F-22 Raptors emerging from the debris field was something Alina's crew would never forget. Sleek and predatory, the four fighters moved with perfect precision through the twisted wreckage of Jump Gate 7, their adaptive camouflage making them seem to flicker in and out of existence against the star field. Ghost Rider, this is Falcon, Leader. We have visual confirmation of your vessel and are conducting initial damage assessment. The pilot's voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd seen combat before. I have to say, it's good to see you alive. A lot of people thought Ghost Rider was gone for good. Alina watched through her viewport as the lead fighter swept alongside the Celestial Dream, its pilot undoubtedly analyzing the massive gashes in her hull and the sparks still arcing from damaged systems. The sight of the military aircraft filled her with a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a deep sadness for the life she'd left behind. The reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, Falcon, Leader, though they weren't entirely inaccurate either. It was true in ways that went beyond the obvious. Major Alina Rodriguez of the 47th Tactical Fighter Squadron had died over Europa, not in the crash that was reported, but in the aftermath of what she'd been forced to do during that final battle. The woman who'd emerged from the wreckage was someone different, someone who'd seen too much and carried too many regrets to continue wearing a military uniform. Copy that, Ghost Rider. Right now we're more interested in keeping you alive than discussing the past. Falcon 3 and 4 are positioning for debris clearance. We're going to cut you a path out of this mess. Alina's crew watched in fascination as two of the fighters maneuvered ahead of the transport, their weapons systems powering up. But instead of the heavy cannons Alina remembered from her military days, these F-22s carried precision plasma cutters designed for exactly this kind of operation. All passengers, this is Captain Rodriguez, Alina announced over the ship's internal communication system. Military rescue vessels are now on station and beginning debris clearance operations. Please remain in your seats and follow all crew instructions. We're going to get through this. The response from the passenger compartments was immediate. Through the ship's internal sensors, Alina could hear people cheering, crying with relief, and in some cases offering prayers in languages she didn't recognize. The Tao sessions had a particular way of expressing gratitude that sounded like singing, while the Altarian students were making a harmonious humming sound that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull. Ma'am, Officer Park spoke up, I'm receiving multiple requests from passengers asking about you. They want to know if you're really Ghost Rider. Alina sighed. News traveled fast aboard a ship in crisis, and apparently some of her passengers were familiar with military history. Ghost Rider had been something of a legend during the Unification Wars, not just for her combat record, but for the number of civilian lives she'd saved during combat operations. Tell them their captain is doing everything possible to get them home safely. That's all they need to know right now. But even as she said it, Alina knew the secret was out. Too many people had heard the radio conversation with the fighter pilots. By the time they reached port, word would spread throughout the civilian shipping community that the legendary Ghost Rider was alive and flying passenger routes under her real name. The implications of that revelation would complicate her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. The Human Defense Coalition would want to debrief her. The media would want interviews. Her passengers would want to know how a war hero had ended up piloting cruise ships through peaceful sectors of space. Ghost Rider, debris clearance complete. We've opened a corridor approximately 5 kilometers wide leading to open space. Falcon 2 will guide you through while 3 and 4 maintain perimeter watch. Roger, Falcon, Leader, beginning navigation sequence. With their external sensors still offline, Alina had to rely entirely on verbal guidance from the fighter pilots. It was a delicate process, requiring absolute trust between the transport captain and the military pilots directing her movements. One miscommunication, one small error in distance or direction, and the massive passenger ship could collide with debris that would tear through her already weakened hull. Ghost Rider, come left 5 degrees and reduce speed to 1/4 thrust. You've got a large section of station framework about 200 meters off your starboard bow. Alina's hands moved smoothly across her controls. her muscle memory guiding the ship with the precision of someone who'd spent years flying in close formation with other vessels. Her civilian crew watched in amazement as their captain navigated blind through the debris field, relying on nothing but voice commands from pilots she couldn't even see. "Captain," Lieutenant Chen whispered, "how are you doing this? How can you fly without instruments?" Alina smiled slightly, remembering similar questions from younger pilots during the war. "During combat operations, you learn to fly by feel as much as by sight. Your instruments can be jammed, your sensors can be deceived, but the ship itself will tell you what it needs if you know how to listen." It was more than just technical skill, though Alina didn't try to explain that to her crew. Flying without instruments required a kind of intuitive connection with the vessel, an ability to feel its responses and interpret the subtle vibrations and sounds that indicated how it was performing. It was something that couldn't be taught in flight school, only learned through experience and necessity. 20 degrees right, Ghost Rider. You're approaching the clear zone, beautiful flying. As the celestial dream finally emerged from the debris field, Alina felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Through the viewport, she could see open space ahead, clean and free of the twisted wreckage that had threatened her ship. Behind them, the remains of Jump Gate 7 continued to drift in a slowly expanding cloud of metal and composite materials. "Falcon Leader, this is Ghost Rider, clear of debris field and proceeding to emergency coordinates. How's the Asterisk Prometheus looking?" The Prometheus Asterisk is 40 minutes out with full medical teams and heavy repair equipment. "But Ghost Rider, we've got a complication. Colonial Command wants to speak with you directly, and they're asking some pointed questions about your identity and current legal status." Alina had been expecting this. The moment she'd revealed her military call sign, she'd triggered security protocols that would bring her case to the attention of various government agencies. The fact that Major Alina Rodriguez was officially listed as killed in action meant her current existence raised questions about everything from identity fraud to potential security breaches. "Understood, Falcon Leader. I'll deal with Colonial Command after we get these passengers to safety." "Negative, Ghost Rider. They want to speak with you now. They're concerned about potential security implications of your presence in this sector." Alina's jaw tightened. She understood their concerns, but she also understood something they apparently didn't. The Celestial Dream still had 180 people aboard who needed medical attention and psychological support after their ordeal. Several passengers had been injured when the ship was damaged, and the alien citizens aboard needed specialized care that only properly equipped facilities could provide. "Falcon Leader, with respect to Colonial Command, I have passengers who need immediate medical attention. Among them are Centauri diplomats whose deaths or injuries could trigger a galactic incident. My personal legal status can wait until after we ensure their safety." The radio was silent for several long seconds. Alina could imagine the conversations happening between the fighter pilots and their commanders, the rapid consultation with various authorities about priorities and protocols. But she also knew that no reasonable military commander would prioritize administrative concerns over a potential diplomatic crisis. "Copy that, Ghost Rider. Colonial Command acknowledges your point about the diplomatic passengers. You're cleared to proceed with medical evacuation procedures. But they want you to understand that there will be a full debriefing once the immediate crisis is resolved." "Understood and accepted, Falcon Leader." Alina looked around at her crew, seeing new respect in their eyes. They just watched their captain face down military authority while standing up for her passengers, putting the safety of the people in her care above her own legal complications. It was exactly the kind of leadership they'd hoped for in a crisis, even if they were only beginning to understand the complex history that had shaped their captain's character. "Ma'am," Officer Park said quietly, "the passengers are asking if you'll address them directly. They want to hear from you that everything's going to be all right." Alina nodded, keying the internal communication system. When she spoke, her voice carried the calm confidence of someone who'd brought people through disasters before. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored guests of all species, this is Captain Rodriguez. I want you to know that the immediate danger has passed. Military rescue vessels are escorting us to safety, and full medical teams will be available within the hour. You've all shown remarkable courage during this crisis, and I'm proud to have been your captain during these difficult circumstances." She paused, then added something that surprised even her own crew. Some of you may have heard references to my military service during our rescue operation. I want you to know that regardless of my past, my commitment is to you and your safety. Every decision I make will be focused on getting you home to your families. That's a promise." The response from throughout the ship was immediate and overwhelming. Humans cheered, Tau Sessions sang their gratitude songs, Altarians hummed their harmonic appreciation, and the Centauri diplomats offered formal expressions of thanks in their melodious language. But as Alina listened to the voices of the people she'd saved, she couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part of this crisis was still ahead. She'd managed to keep her ship and passengers alive, but now she had to face the consequences of revealing her true identity. Ghost Rider was about to learn whether the galaxy had changed enough to forgive a hero who'd chosen to disappear rather than accept the medals and recognition she'd earned through sacrifice and loss. The medical bay aboard the rescue vessel Prometheus was unlike anything Alina had seen during her military service. Advanced healing chambers designed to accommodate different alien physiologies lined the walls, while human, Centauri, and Altarian medical personnel worked together with seamless coordination. The galaxy had indeed changed in the years since the war. Alina sat in the observation area, watching as the last of her passengers received treatment. The Tau Session refugees had suffered some respiratory distress due to their species' sensitivity to pressure changes, but the medical team had them stabilized within minutes using techniques that combined human emergency medicine with Tau Session physiological knowledge. The sight of different species working together so naturally to save lives filled Alina with a bittersweet mixture of hope and regret. This was the future she'd fought for during the Unification Wars, a time when cooperation would replace conflict. But it was also a future she'd thought she could never be part of again. "Captain Rodriguez?" a voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see a tall woman in colonial command uniform approaching, flanked by what appeared to be a mixed delegation of human and alien officials. "I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, Colonial Defense Command. We need to talk." Alina stood and nodded respectfully. She'd known this moment was coming, had been preparing for it during the 3 hours it had taken to evacuate all her passengers. "Of course, Admiral, though I'd prefer to speak after I've confirmed that all my people are properly cared for." "Your passengers are receiving excellent care, Captain. But right now, we have some urgent questions about your identity and how you came to be commanding a civilian vessel in this sector." The alien members of the delegation stepped forward, and Alina recognized the formal diplomatic protocols they were following. The lead figure was clearly Centauri, with the distinctive blue-tinted skin and elegant bearing of that species' diplomatic corps. Beside him stood what appeared to be a Tau Session official and an Altarian cultural attaché. "Captain Rodriguez," the Centauri diplomat spoke in accented but perfect English, "I am Ambassador Zethrak. The passengers you saved today included 3 of my staff members. Before we address any other concerns, I must express the gratitude of the Centauri Federation for your actions." Alina inclined her head in acknowledgement. "I was simply doing my job, Ambassador." "Perhaps," the Tau Session official interjected, "but your job appears to require skills far beyond those of a typical merchant captain. Our refugees reported that you navigated through the debris field without instruments, relying solely on verbal guidance from fighter pilots. Such skill suggests extensive military training." Admiral Chen stepped forward. "Which brings us to our primary concern, Captain. Our records show that Major Alina Rodriguez of the 47th Tactical Fighter Squadron died in action over Europa 10 years ago. Yet here you are, very much alive and somehow in possession of classified military authorization codes." Alina had rehearsed this conversation in her mind dozens of times over the years, knowing that eventually her past would catch up with her. But she'd never imagined it happening under these circumstances, surrounded by the people she'd just saved and diplomatic representatives of species she'd helped protect. "The official report of my death was convenient for all parties involved," Alina said carefully. "The battle over Europa was complicated with significant political implications. Sometimes it's easier for everyone if certain details remain classified." "That's not good enough," Admiral Chen replied firmly. "We need the full story, Captain. Your actions today have drawn attention from the highest levels of government, both human and alien. The security implications alone." "Admiral," The voice that interrupted belonged to Falcon Leader, who had just entered the medical bay still wearing his flight suit. Alina could see his face clearly for the first time, and she felt her breath catch. It was Colonel Marcus Webb, her former squadron commander and one of the few people who knew the complete truth about what had happened over Europa. "Colonel Webb," Admiral Chen acknowledged, "I wasn't expecting you here." "With respect, Admiral, I think there are some things you need to understand about Ghost Rider before this conversation goes any further." Webb looked directly at Alina, and she could see both relief and sadness in his eyes. What happened over Europa wasn't just a military operation. It was a choice between saving thousands of civilian lives and following direct orders from command. Alina felt the familiar weight of old guilt settling on her shoulders. "Marcus, don't." "No, Alina, they need to know." Webb turned to address the assembled officials. Major Rodriguez was ordered to destroy a civilian refugee ship that had been taken over by enemy forces. The ship was being used to transport captured civilians as human shields during a military operation. Command wanted it eliminated to prevent the enemy from escaping. Ambassador Zethrak's expression became very serious. "And what did Major Rodriguez choose to do?" Webb's voice carried the weight of old admiration and sorrow. "She disobeyed direct orders and instead disabled the enemy vessels while allowing the refugee ship to escape. She saved over 3,000 civilian lives, including families from 6 different species. But her actions also allowed enemy forces to retreat and regroup, extending the war by several months." Alina closed her eyes, remembering that day with painful clarity. The refugee ship had been filled with families, children, elderly civilians from multiple species who'd been caught in the wrong place when the fighting started. Command had classified them as acceptable casualties in pursuit of military objectives. Alina had chosen differently. "After the battle," Webb continued, "Major Rodriguez was officially listed as killed in action. It was the only way to prevent her court-martial while also protecting her from retaliation by military hardliners who disagreed with her choice. She was given a new identity and encouraged to start over." Admiral Chen looked stunned. "You're telling me that Ghost Rider was exiled from the military for saving civilian lives?" "Not exiled," Alina spoke up quietly. "Given a choice. I could face trial for disobeying orders with the possibility of military prison, or I could accept official death and start a new life. The war was ending anyway, and there were people in command who understood that the galaxy was changing, that we needed to learn to value all life equally." The Altarian attaché, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. His species communicated partially through harmonic vibrations, and Alina could hear the subtle tones that indicated deep emotional resonance. "Captain Rodriguez, among my people, there is a concept that translates roughly as life-song guardian. It refers to someone who chooses to protect the vulnerable regardless of personal cost. Your actions over Europa, and again today with our students aboard your vessel, mark you as such a guardian." Alina felt tears threatening for the first time in years. The Altarian concept was beautiful, but she'd never thought of herself as anything more than someone trying to do the right thing in impossible circumstances. "The question now," Ambassador Zethrak said thoughtfully, "is what happens next. Captain Rodriguez has clearly demonstrated that her exile from military service was a loss for all of us. Perhaps it's time to consider whether past decisions need to be reconsidered." Admiral Chen looked troubled. "That's not a decision I can make unilaterally. The political implications alone would require approval from the highest levels of government." "Then perhaps," Colonel Webb suggested, "we should focus on what we can control. Captain Rodriguez has just demonstrated extraordinary skill and judgment in saving lives during a crisis. The Celestial Dream will need extensive repairs, which means she'll be without a ship for several months." Alina understood where this was heading, but she wasn't sure how she felt about it. The idea of returning to military service, even temporarily, brought up emotions she'd spent 10 years trying to suppress. "What are you suggesting, Colonel?" "Temporary reactivation as a special consultant. There are situations that require someone with your unique combination of skills and experience. Civilian operations where military precision is needed, but where official military involvement would be politically complicated." The Tau Session official nodded enthusiastically. "Our mining platforms have been experiencing increased pirate activity. We've been reluctant to request military intervention due to sovereignty concerns, but a civilian consultant with military training. Could operate in areas where regular military forces couldn't, Alina finished. She could see the logic in the proposal, but it also meant stepping back into a world she'd left behind for good reason. Alina looked around the room at the faces watching her. Admiral Chen with her professional concern for security and protocol. The alien diplomats with their obvious gratitude and hope for future cooperation. Colonel Webb with his understanding of her past and faith in her abilities. And in the background, visible through the medical bay's observation windows, she could see some of her passengers. The Tau Session family that had been traveling to start a new life in human space. The Altarian students who'd come to learn about human culture. The Centauri diplomats who were working to build stronger ties between their species and humanity. All of them alive, because she'd made the choice to reveal her true identity when they needed help. If I agreed to this temporary reactivation, Alina said slowly, what would my parameters be? I won't take orders that conflict with protecting innocent lives regardless of their species. Admiral Chen actually smiled. Captain, given what you've just demonstrated, I think that's exactly the kind of judgment we need. The galaxy has changed since the war ended. We need people who understand that our security depends on protecting everyone, not just humans. Alina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decision. For 10 years, she'd run from her past, trying to build a quiet life free from the moral complexities of military service. But today had shown her something important. Some people couldn't run from who they were meant to be. All right, she said finally, let's talk terms. 3 months later, Alina stood on the bridge of the Asterisk Stellar Harmony Asterisk, watching as her mixed crew of humans, Centauri, Tau Sessions, and Altarians worked together with the efficiency of a perfectly tuned instrument. The ship itself was a marvel of interspecies cooperation, incorporating the best technology and design principles from all 4 major galactic civilizations. Her official title was Special Operations Coordinator, a deliberately vague designation that allowed her to operate in situations where traditional military response would be politically complicated. In practice, it meant she'd become something unique in the galaxy, a bridge between military precision and civilian sensibilities, someone who could command respect from both hardened veterans and diplomatic corps members. Captain, reported Lieutenant Vashra, her Centauri navigation officer, we're approaching the Kepler 442 system. The mining platform is broadcasting distress calls on multiple frequencies. Alina nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the situation ahead. The Tau Session mining platform Deep Harvest had been attacked by pirates 3 days earlier, but this wasn't a simple raid for valuable minerals. Intelligence suggested that the pirates were actually testing galactic response times and coordination between species, probing for weaknesses in the new alliance structure. Communications, open a channel to the platform. Let them know help has arrived. The response came immediately, filled with relief and gratitude. This is Platform Commander Keldon. Thank the stars you're here. The pirates have been harassing our evacuation shuttles for 3 days. We have families aboard, including younglings. Alina's expression hardened. Attacking evacuation shuttles carrying children was beyond simple piracy. It was terrorism designed to break down trust between species by demonstrating that the Alliance couldn't protect its most vulnerable citizens. Commander Keldon, this is Captain Rodriguez aboard the Asterisk Stellar Harmony Asterisk. We're moving to intercept the hostile vessels. Get your shuttles ready for immediate evacuation under our escort. What followed was a masterclass in the kind of multi-species cooperation that Alina had once only dreamed of. Her Altarian weapons officer used his species' advanced targeting systems to precisely disable pirate engines without destroying the ships. Her Centauri pilot executed maneuvers that combined human tactical thinking with Centauri spatial intuition. Her Tau Session engineer managed power distribution with the efficiency that made her species the galaxy's premier industrial planners. But it was Alina's command decisions that tied it all together, the hard-won wisdom of someone who'd learned that protecting innocent lives was worth any personal cost. Ghost Rider, this is Falcon Leader. We're detecting multiple pirate vessels moving to intercept your position. Alina smiled as she recognized Colonel Webb's voice. He'd been assigned as her military liaison, coordinating between her Special Operations Unit and regular colonial defense forces. The arrangement worked perfectly. combining her tactical flexibility with his knowledge of official protocols and procedures. Copy, Falcon Leader. We have the situation under control, but will take whatever backup you can provide. What the pirates hadn't expected was facing a coordinator who could think like both a military officer and a civilian protection specialist. Alina's tactics weren't designed to achieve military victory, but to ensure the safety of non-combatants while demonstrating that the Galactic Alliance took protection of all species seriously. The pirate ships found themselves outmaneuvered and overwhelmed not by superior firepower, but by superior coordination. Alina's mixed-species crew worked with the kind of seamless integration that sent a clear message. The galaxy's civilizations were stronger together than any of them had been alone. Captain, her Altarian communications officer reported, the pirate commander is requesting to speak with you directly. Alina considered this. Pirate leaders didn't usually want to negotiate during active combat. Something about this situation was more complex than it appeared. Put him through. The image that appeared on her screen was not what she expected. Instead of a rough-looking human or alien raider, she saw a dignified older man wearing what appeared to be modified colonial defense uniform insignia. Captain Rodriguez, the man said with obvious respect. Or should I say, Major Rodriguez, I'm Captain Jackson, formerly of the 15th Colonial Marines. I wanted to speak with you before this goes any further. Alina felt a chill of recognition. Captain Jackson had been reported killed in action during the same campaign where she'd supposedly died. The implications of his survival, like hers, raised uncomfortable questions about what had really happened during the final stages of the Unification Wars. Captain Jackson, why are you attacking civilian targets? Because someone needs to test whether this new galactic alliance actually works, or whether it's just political theater that will collapse the first time real pressure is applied. Jackson's expression was earnest, almost pleading. Major, you know as well as I do that good intentions aren't enough. These different species need to prove they can actually fight together when things get difficult. Alina understood what he was saying, but she also understood something he apparently didn't. The crew members working around her, humans and aliens functioning as a single coordinated team, were already proof that the alliance worked. Not because they shared the same biology, but because they shared the same commitment to protecting innocent lives. Captain Jackson, you're right that the alliance needs to be tested, but not by terrorizing families and children. The real test is whether we can work together to stop people like you. She gestured to her crew, and Jackson's eyes widened as he realized what he was seeing. The bridge of the Asterisk Stellar Harmony represented everything the old colonial defense forces had claimed was impossible. Different species cooperating not just politically, but operationally, trusting each other with their lives in combat situations. Stand down, Jackson. Let's discuss this properly. For a moment, Alina thought he might agree. But then his expression hardened with the stubborn pride of someone who'd fought too long to admit he might be wrong. Negative, Major. If this alliance is going to work, it needs to earn its credibility the hard way. The battle that followed was brief but intense. Jackson's pirates fought with military precision, but they were facing something they weren't prepared for. Opponents who combined military skill with absolute commitment to protecting non-combatants. Alina's crew didn't just defeat the pirates. They captured them with minimal casualties on either side while ensuring the complete safety of the mining platforms evacuating families. When it was over, Alina stood in the brig looking at Captain Jackson through the security barrier. He looked older than she remembered, worn down by years of fighting battles that no longer had clear meaning or purpose. You were testing the wrong thing, Jack, she said quietly. The real strength of this alliance isn't whether we can fight together. It's whether we can choose not to fight when there's a better way. Jackson was quiet for a long moment. Maybe you're right, Alina. Maybe things really have changed. They have. The question is whether you're willing to change with them. 2 weeks later, Alina stood in the observation deck of Starbase Aurora, watching as the Asterisk Deep Harvest Asterisk mining platform resumed operations. The Tau Session families had returned to their homes and work, but now they were protected by a permanent defense grid staffed by volunteers from all 4 major galactic civilizations. More importantly, Captain Jackson and several of his former pirates had accepted rehabilitation postings, using their military experience to help train the new integrated defense forces. It turned out that even people who'd lost their way could find purpose again when given the chance to protect instead of destroy. Captain Rodriguez, a familiar voice said behind her. Elena turned to see Ambassador Zethrak approaching, accompanied by representatives from the other allied species. Ambassador, I trust the mining platform is meeting expectations. More than meeting them, the Centauri diplomat replied. Production is up 40% since we implemented integrated security protocols, but that's not why we're here. The Altarian attaché stepped forward, his harmonic voice carrying formal tones that Elena recognized as significant. Captain Rodriguez, the Allied Council has been discussing your unique role in galactic security. We believe the galaxy needs more coordinators like you, people who can bridge the gap between military necessity and civilian protection. Elena had been expecting this conversation, but she still wasn't sure how she felt about the implications. What exactly are you proposing? The Tau Session representative spoke up. A new organization, operating under joint authority of all allied species. Special operations coordinators who can respond to situations that require both military expertise and diplomatic sensitivity. You would lead the training program and serve as the first senior coordinator. Elena looked out at the stars beyond the observation deck, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 10 years ago, she'd been a military officer who'd chosen conscience over orders and had been forced to disappear. 3 months ago, she'd been a civilian captain trying to save her passengers. Now she was being offered the chance to help build something entirely new, a force dedicated to protecting all life in the galaxy, regardless of species or politics. There's one condition, she said finally. This organization answers to all allied species equally, but its primary mission is always the protection of innocent lives. Military objectives, political considerations, even strategic advantages come second to that commitment. Agreed, Ambassador Zethrak said immediately, and the other representatives nodded their consent. Elena smiled, feeling a sense of purpose that she hadn't experienced since her military days, but without the moral conflicts that had driven her away from service in the first place. In that case, I accept, but I'm going to need a bigger ship. As she watched the mixed crews working together on the mining platform below, Elena reflected on the irony of her situation. She'd spent years running from the call sign Ghost Rider, trying to escape the reputation and responsibilities that came with it. But in the end, the galaxy had needed Ghost Rider to return, not as a weapon of war, but as a guardian of peace. The radio in her pocket crackled to life with a familiar voice. Ghost Rider, this is Falcon Leader. We've got reports of a situation near the Vega system. Sounds like something that could use your particular touch. Elena keyed her radio with a smile. Copy Falcon Leader, Ghost Rider is en route. Some call signs, she realized, weren't meant to be abandoned. They were meant to evolve, to grow into something better than they'd started as. And in a galaxy where different species were learning to work together, maybe that evolution was exactly what everyone needed.